morning, everybody, and thank you for being here. Welcome to the JDC West 2016 International Business Case Presentation. First off, we'd like to say a huge thanks to our judges. We have Gary Vickers from EMCO, Josh Lawson from Scotiabank, Michael Kozar from Federated Cooperatives Limited, Kenneth Coates from Johnson Shariyama Graduate School of Public Policy, Wayne Brownlee from Potash Corp, and Carolyn Tastat from P&G. Competitors will have a maximum of 20 minutes to present. Immediately following the presentation, judges will have a total of 5 minutes to ask presenters questions. The volunteer timekeeper will show time cards at various intervals to indicate the remaining time, and will stop any speaker who exceeds the maximum time limit. No questions, comments, cell phones, or picture taking will be permitted from the audience at any time. The audience will only be permitted to applaud following the question and answer period. The audience is banned from any material that bears the name or a symbol of a competing university, and we ask that the audience exit the room immediately following the question and answer period. So competitors, you may begin when you are ready.
Granite. Much like your geological namesake, we intend on bringing today to you a proposition that is rock solid. Now, our intentions are to put you in a place and a position where you are not ethically accountable or legally liable for any instances that may occur within the propositions that have been pitched towards you. Now, moving forward today, what we're going to take you through are some issues that we've seen currently within the propositions that have been pitched, and they're currently going on within the external environments. As well, we're going to take you through an analysis of your company itself and a flight, and as well what is going on in the industry today. Following that, we're going to give you some alternative recommendations, and then one that we find will fit your company style quite well. With that, we'll go on and show you how you can go about implementing that and deliver the most premium solution through proposition. So we'd like to start out by identifying a critical issue, and that is, should you accept the proposal with flight? Now, this is something that's happening within the next 3 hours, so it's very urgent. As well, how are you going to integrate within the expanding airline market? That's something we feel is a primary issue. Right now, especially with the airline industry growing, we feel like there's a lot of opportunity for you to integrate and find yourself in a position where you're not accountable for some mishaps that are potentially to occur in the future. Now, you'll notice that there are a couple issues that we believe are there as well, and that is ethical accountability. Now, we see that as something secondary to the primary issue, and we want to mitigate that for you. That's a huge risk that you could run, and so we have some great solutions for that. As well, there's a financial impact. So we would like to put you in a position where you're able to expand and increase the amount of revenue that you're receiving, which will in the end lead to higher profits. But at the same time, we don't want to put you in a position where the ethical standpoint of the consumer is going to affect you negatively. So I'm going to start you out with an internal analysis. So as you can see, you have a really strong customer service, and the people that you have working for you are very knowledgeable of the industry. With the opportunity to improve in your financial capacity, you'll find that you're restricted in your expansion where you currently are, because you don't have enough finances to be able to grow. We find that by branching out and accepting the proposal, you will have a little bit more opportunity, but we feel that there's a counter proposal that could help a little bit more than the one that was initially proposed. As well, you are not exclusive with Flight, so we feel like there's an opportunity to maybe have an exclusive partnership with Flight in the future. Now, as it stands, you're currently making $2.2 million in revenue per year, and as you can see with constraints, you're actually making a lot less than your competitors, but we don't think that you're going for the same kind of market as your competitor either. Now, you've already invested $200,000 into the African and Middle Eastern project, and we feel that maybe this is potentially a constraint internally. Maybe you feel like you're starting to get invested into the market, but that's not something that you have to follow through with. And as we had mentioned earlier, because of financials, you're constrained to the amount of growth that you're limited to. Now, at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Luke, and he's going to take you through a little bit of an analysis of the external environment.
Now we're going to just talk about what kind of market you're dealing with in a little bit more in-depth terms. The growth with Flight is going to be a good opportunity for both of your parties, and this being Flight because they're having a little bit of financial difficulties for the moment, but having an intermediator such as yourself would be a good opportunity for them, and for you, you could get into some of the markets that Flight has been with in the past, because they've got a little bit of knowledge already in Africa and Middle East. Into the threats, the biggest one being possible ethical dilemmas. Like it's not 100% sure on your party's end which is going to be exactly true and which is going to be not true. The customer analysis is the customers of in Africa and the Middle East. We're not sure what kind of information is going on their end because they're not being totally transparent with you, and that's a problem. We want you to be aware of the questionable practices that are prevalent in the Middle East and Africa, as corruption and bribes are quite high compared to some of the other countries you're dealing with, such as Sweden and Norway. Going into the industry, it's expanding, and there's a lot of opportunity to grow with it as well, especially with Flight having their flight data recorders. It's something important because security has been huge since 2014, primarily with the disappearance of the Malaysian flight. And we're going to be going into more of how important this is for you guys, especially with this time crunch that you're experiencing right now. Just for the Flight analysis, more in depth, is that they have had a net loss of the 4.3 million, and that they're feeling that, and it seems like they're gonna be bouncing back from that, but with your help, it's gonna go a lot more smoothly, and that's something that you know, Mr. McAdams, and the steady growth for opportunity is going to be seen in the Middle East and Africa right now with all the new startups. And the prior experience in the short haul, such as in the Canadian Arctic and the Scandinavian countries that they're in right now, it's not new to them, and that's where they work best. Moving on to the financials is going to be Michelle. Thank you.
So part of our financial analysis is the cost to any, to particularly the three projects that are being presented to you right now. So an average flight data recorder costs anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000, but with Flight, as you know, it's about $50,000 per unit. So with the expected demand for the next three projects in the year, with the $50,000 per unit, we can estimate that over the next 5 years, it's going to cost them $180,625. Again, amounts are in the thousands per year. That's a lot of money, especially when there is cheaper alternatives out there. But if we look at the next slide, we can clearly it indicates how much cost it has if an airplane crashes. So there's like the cost to repair the airplane, the adverse fatality, and economic value. So just in one plane crash alone, it's estimated about $378 million just by one. And so in the previous slide, we so if we go to the next slide, then yeah. So do you want to pay $180 million in the next 5 years, or $378 million that could happen at an uncertain amount of time? So yes, this flight technology isn't expensive, but you can clearly see for any company that doesn't want to have these losses in the long term, that the flight technology is what they want.
Now going into the alternatives that we've set up for you. Right now we've chosen three main ones. The first one is to be accepting the the flight proposal, and in turn taking a larger portion of the control, the responsibility, and things that you might not exactly be experienced with. Going into the counter proposal to the airlines, what we're thinking is you have to be a little bit more demanding right now, because those 3 airlines, they're startups, and with your company you could be essential to them because you're high experience, much of their 15 representatives being executives in the airlines, and with your quick response time for issues, it could be essential for a company that's going to have a lot of trouble in the first few years of starting up. And the third one being, don't enter into either of the 3 proposals, and because you're going to just clear out a headache. And if you're already going into this situation not knowing about whether these kind of cultural customs are the norm or not, you're already having an issue right there, especially if you're partnered up with Flight and they haven't experienced this to the level of degree where they've had to make a drastic change within the past 4 hours to your agreement that you had made in the partnership originally. So that we'll be moving on to picking the bottom 2. If we're thinking that if you have a counteroffer to the airlines, they might not accept it, because with the other 2 multi-billion-dollar corporations putting in bids, most likely they're going to go with them because they want their demands and not new demands with this sort of operation. And we don't see this as an issue. We see this as a benefit, because right now you're going to be learning a lot and you're going to be avoiding something that could have been detrimental to your company. And to that, don't enter into the proposals. Just get rid of that out of the way and move on and start looking towards the future investments that you could be making with or without Flight, depending on whether your 2 companies can reevaluate another idea. And the potential investment, this doesn't have to be limited to the expanding markets of Africa and the Middle East. It could be looking to some places that you're already more comfortable with. And we'll move on to the next slide here. This is the counter proposal. Right now, one of the biggest issues is the lack of communication and the lack of trust. And what you guys could demand for is getting some more time, some more exact numbers, and to not have so many unknown costs bumping up into the equation, because to us it can sound like these guys are willing to put in a proposal, they're willing to put in this much money and resources, maybe they're willing to put in a little bit more. And you don't want to be taken advantage of as a company, especially when you're just starting into a certain area and with new airlines. And again, promoting your company is essential, especially to the small ones who can afford you more than maybe the bigger companies. And with your special skills and assets, you bring so much more to the table that these big companies, they don't really care for the peanuts, they want the big businesses. And maybe they'll be grabbing for some of these smaller airlines, but they won't be putting as much of an effort as you and your company would. So don't enter into the proposals. This could be the start of a beautiful relationship between you 2, and you don't want to have it go off on the wrong foot. Right now, with them pulling out and changing some of the agreement details, we think it's something that you could pull back from and both take a look at together and have this communication between you 2 where it can only grow from there and you guys can really benefit from it together. The future investment, as I mentioned before, we know that you guys are in Sweden and Norway and that you have process with dealing with risk. You guys can be working together, and working in Scandinavia, you could move into places such as Denmark, Estonia as well, because it's close with Finland and Iceland, and you could go with their cultural norms that are more accustomed, or more in line of what you're accustomed to, and you could be doing some international expansion there, and maybe getting some more sales for yourself and Flight together. And the dealing with risk, working out some sort of system to prevent or work around further possible bribes or facilitation payments, which right now have been propping up from all 3 of your, unluckily from all 3 of your airline proposals. Moving on to the timeline is going to be Ethan.
All right, fantastic. Thanks a lot, Luke.
Yeah.
So, clearly, you're at a crossroads here. What you've been faced with is the opportunity to follow through with a proposition from flight where you would be putting yourself in a situation where you could be prone to situations of bribery, where you could be prone to ethical issues, where you may be held accountable, especially with them transferring a larger portion of the accountability to yourselves. Now, obviously this isn't the case scenario that you'd like to go through with, and you can move on with a counter proposal. Now, this is an idea of how this can happen, and how as well you can incorporate some of the other ideas that we brought forward to you today. Now that would start out with, within the next 3 hours, bringing the counter proposal that we brought forward to you towards flight, offering them some slight changes in exchange for a contract that falls in line with both of your needs, and then including the airline proposition as well. So talking to them about the changes that you would like to see within the 3 airlines that are in Africa and the Middle East, and then also telling them about some more opportunities, as Luke had mentioned, on if this was not to go through and the airlines were not pleased with this scenario, you're avoiding at least the ethical risk, and you can move on to maybe some European countries that you're more familiar with and that you've had success with in the past. We see a lot of opportunity here, and we feel like it's very in line with what your company's ethical standards are, and it will also fall in line with flights as well. Now we're going to move on to a short-term solution with throughout the implementation, and that's going to be gauging the reaction of the proposals, making any necessary changes that you need to be made. It's really an analysis of where things are going and how you're going to get from point A to point B with, while at the same time providing the best solution for all parties. At the end of the day, the party that's most important to you, though, is yourself. And regardless of what happens, Granite should be held at the forefront of your track. Now, as well, you might want to reevaluate your partnership parameters. So that's even looking into where things are going. Is there more opportunity elsewhere for growth? And pretty much evaluating the successes and how you can either enhance that or where you can look for other opportunities for growth. Now, if things go really well, you have the possibility to end up extending your contract, and in the long term, that's when that will happen, as well as a little more analysis of the market. We feel like this is just a stepping stone for where you can be, and by making this expansion and going through with these propositions, you have the opportunity to grow furthermore with flight, and we feel like there's a lot of synergy between you two, and you can get from point A to point B. It just takes a little tailoring to both parties. Now, with that, that's addressing some of the international expansion that you could be attaining in the future as well. And before we move on, I'd just like to address the fact that you are facing as well, obviously, other competition potentially when it comes 3 hours from now and you're in the boardroom and people are making bids. Now, either you're going to be faced against these large companies that are going against, against yourselves for flight, a company that currently isn't so prosperous. And these are multi-billion companies that are interested, that we believe might not even be interested in this small deal. So we think that you actually, either you're facing a scenario where they're just trying to hurry up the bid acceptance, or you're facing a scenario where you have some strong competitors and you might have to look to some alternative solutions. In the meantime, I'd like to pass it over to Michelle. She's going to take you over some financials to do with our implementation and to make things a little clearer in that aspect as well. Thank you.
All right, so of course, without going forward with these SCC payments, the 3 projects aren't going to be as willing to go forward with you. But we got this first line up here showing just how much profit margin you'd be making from each one of these, the flight devices, including the facilitated payments. So yes, your profit margin originally was $5,000, but with these extra payments, this is actually how much your profit margins are going to be per unit. So part of our counter offer that you bring forward to these 3 projects, not including flight's profits at all. It's maybe cutting back on your net profits a little bit and offering a little bit lower than the $50,000 unit price. So those are the prices that we suggest for the next 5 years that you offer to them as part of your counteroffer. And then the bottom two lines show the savings that each one of those companies would be making from that $50,000 to the, or from like the $5,000 profit margin to the one that we suggested, compared to how much money they were asking you for, like the three companies total in each one of these facilitated payments. Next, I'm going to pass it off to Ethan, and he's going to go through the risks and mitigation.
So now we talked about some of the risks earlier, and we mitigated the ethical risks that you could run into. Now we're just going to take you over some medium probability risks right now, and that is the airlines might not be happy with your proposal. So in that scenario, you have the possibility to venture Europe, as we had said, or the possibility as well to just expand your horizons and move on with your partnerships as well. Potentially Flight may not accept the proposal. This could happen, and we think there is a bit of severity to it, but you will have no loss of profits from where you are, and you have the potential to look for other partnerships in the future. We are Compass Consulting. Thank you for your time. We now open the floor to questions.
Question to add?
Clarifying for me specifically what we're proposing for Flight?
I'll take that. For Flight, we're proposing to back off from the proposals into Africa and in the Middle East until we can work together and figure out what's going on with like their cultural differences and their business practices before trying to like jump in last minute on this potential offer. And that way, even though they've already been in Africa and Middle East before, and they clearly don't know what's going on exactly because they're so surprised by these potential risks of the bribes, and just working together and figuring out this before moving on into these territories is that proposal between the two companies. Yeah.
Just to add to that as well, the last slide, financial slide that I had up there as well, before like the company was making about $5,000 net profit margin, we were part of our counter offer to the three projects would be to lower the cost per unit of the flight technology that they're asking for. That would be part of our counter offer.
And just to clarify, and I'm sorry, but are you basically saying, don't take a pass at crime, pre-figure this thing out over time? Was that correct?
Yeah, take some time to reflect, and because it's a pretty big loss if it turns out there is a bribing and negative ethical things going on for your company as well as Flight.
By potentially proposing to decrease your sale price, what impact do you think that has on your existing customer base?
Well, other companies offer discounts to their customers in bulk depending on the certain situations. Like if you buy in a bigger volume, you'll give you a lower cost. So it just seems like a practice that every other company does as well. Unfortunately, this is a little bit different of a situation than like one customer buying more than another customer, but it's just part of doing business in other countries.
How sure are you that these are actual bribes? You're actually walking away from a whole bunch of business on sort of a fairly superficial understanding, it seems to me.
For sure. Yeah, I'll actually dive right into that. So we felt there was a lot of there's a large lack of transparency within the conversations that you were having with your distributors and or with the airline representatives rather, and that a lot of the information that you wanted to have provided to you, it couldn't come until the proposition was expected, and no numbers were up front, no confirmation on like confirmation letters on the amounts not being bribes were provided up front. We feel these are all values and information that you would like to give to someone that you're looking for future business with, because it's reassurance. Now, if someone doesn't want to reassure you that they're not committing fraud, they're not bribing, and they're not getting into unethical standards and occurrences, well, they're probably going through with bribes and not playing in an ethical fashion in that case.
So
we've invested $200,000 to get the RFPs to this point, and the risk of bribes seems to be the primary reason we can't proceed. I'm just curious that you identified it as a secondary issue in terms of ethical responsibility. I'm just curious why you wouldn't rank that higher in your analysis.
For sure. Well, at the end of the day, you're going to want to deal with it regardless. Ethical issues, it's huge. It's something that has to be dealt with, but you don't have to face these ethical issues. You can choose to take other paths and still maintain yourself as a company. You can still retain the profits that you are getting today and see future success without these 3 airlines. But if you want to follow through with these 3 airlines, that is an ethical scenario that you'd have to deal with. So.
It could be seen as a sunk cost, and it's not always good to chase losses.
Just in your commercial analysis, did you consider raising the price at some point? One of our key strategic advantages is the amount of downtime we save on engines per month. Did you ever consider we're not charging that?
We didn't quite take a look at that, but it's something that we could look at in the future.
Sure. Cheers. Thank you for your time.
That's all the time we have for questions, so thank you very much.